Reviewing data is really time consuming and we don't have that kind of time. We'll just trust our gut instincts and go with what we know. That is absolutely not true, and I'm going to talk you through why that is. Hello and welcome to Engage and Thrive, also known as EAT, your coffee catch up with me, your host Taelon, where we will go through common problems and hurdles that come up in business, marketing and advertising and try and demystify them. I know firsthand how complicated and confusing it can seem with all the different acronyms and all the things to do in business. So let me try and help you be better in business. First things first, let's start with grabbing a coffee. Okay, so as always, I'm going to explain to you why I believe that statement is just factually incorrect. Now, don't get me wrong. I know reviewing data and analysing it can be time consuming. But like with all these processes, the initial setup period is always going to be the longest. And then once you get into a rhythm and a flow, it'll get easier. And if you don't review the data, how do you know what's working and therefore what you should be doing more of? The other thing to know is obviously by having that data at your fingertips can give you a competitive edge against your competitors in the market. You can also spot trends and see what's happening where you may not even realize that's happening. And above all, this kind of goes into the same with strategy. It's the science. You can have all these gorgeous, creative, all the videos and photos you want in the world. But if you don't have that science behind it of what it's actually doing, then there's no point. You need the art and science to go together. Okay, as always, we're going to start with acronyms. Now, there's a lot of acronyms to go through as it is data. So I'll try and go through each one step by step, but a lot of them will need their own episode to explain more in depth how you actually get that number, where you would calculate that, what the data source is. So the first one to go through is something called an MQL, which is a marketing qualified lead. This typically is what people would just call their leads coming in. So people may have completed your online form or anything, and they've just submitted a, yes, I'm interested. Which then leads into the next one, which is an SQL, and that's a sales qualified lead. So that means once you have that lead or that person that submitted their interest in your service or product, and you've vetted them against, can they actually afford it? Or are they the right demographic? Or do they qualify for that treatment? Whatever the situation, that would then be called a sales qualified lead. The next one, as we've been over many times, is ROI, return on investment. So what you're doing, are you getting good bang for your buck? Next one is your KPI. Again, we've covered those before. So key performance indicators. Your CRM, so your customer relationship management system. So that is essentially where you're going to store your customer data. And in terms of your like funnel, when you're reporting, that would be like the end part of your funnel. Again, looping everything round. A lot of people just report on this is the marketing metrics and not actually the full picture of the people you have in the pipeline. And then did they buy in? Then obviously you've got your CPA, which is your cost per acquisition. This absolutely will be its own other episode because I'm really passionate about this. And there's so many situations that you need to take into account of how you actually calculate this. And it's really, really important to understand this. Now, there's a lot more other acronyms in terms of like customer lifetime value and etc. For this, it's too complicated. Let's just go through the basics. Okay, now we're going to go through 3 key takeaways, or I suppose fundamentals, and how you actually set up your process of digging your data and extracting that data for how you're going to use it. So number 1 is to establish terminology and metrics. This may seem like baby's first basics, but honestly, it's so good to have that terminology just kind of exactly as it is. So when we're talking about users, we mean users on the website. Or when we're talking about impressions, this is impressions across all social medias. Or we're actually interested in how many messages we get this month. So, well, not necessarily this month, but in totality. So therefore, a message is when we are sent something on a platform. Does a message include an email? Then we're talking about phone calls. Does a phone call mean a phone call through a social platform, or a phone call to an actual physical phone number? Or does it mean schedule a call? Or if you have consultations, how many consultations are booked? What happens if you don't have people turning up to consultation? Are you going to measure that number of the actual turning up to a consultation rate? There's honestly so many things, and it's really, really good. The same with when I went into the acronyms. Are you calling your leads your marketing qualified leads or your sales qualified leads? Do you know then things like how long it takes from once you get a lead to them actually buying your product or service? So understanding that moving scale, taking into consideration when you're doing any of your data. So then with metrics of each of those data points, what's your aim? So are you looking to generate at least 100 leads per month, and you're looking at a conversion of one sale from those 100 leads? Is that your KPI? Is that your target, that you want one sale generated per month? Is it that you actually want to reach a new market, so therefore you're more interested in the impressions that you're reaching to grow your brand? So all of these are very, very important to establish upfront. Otherwise, you're just going to be pulling data and just putting numbers either on a presentation or in a dashboard or whatever. Geographical locations, devices, downloads, all of that, very, very important. Which then kind of leads me into number 2, which is the frequency of your data. This will go hand in hand with the metrics and the KPIs you're setting as a business and your business objectives, therefore the frequency of the data that you should be extracting or reporting. Now, some things are potentially going to be daily monitoring, right? And you don't need to be writing a report about the data, but you're just reviewing it. So if you're posting on social, you might review, how did that post go that I posted yesterday? How many comments? How many likes? What's the activity? Is it doing better? You know, if you're using TikTok a lot, you will see, is it doing better in the first 30 seconds or the first 24 hours than other posts? Some of that you don't need to be necessarily reporting to anyone. But then if you want to do like a comparison of a like for like, I would say a minimum of bi-weekly is really important to review kind of where you are at a 2-week stand. And especially if you're running campaigns. So 2 weeks is a good way of analysing what's happened. I would say anything under 2 weeks is almost too frequent. And if you're going to make changes under 2 weeks, the campaign's still embedding, still learning, still optimizing, and still doing things, and you should be tweaking and tinkering. And then I would say a monthly report is a very, very good analysis. And whether it's something that you just keep in your log and you're kind of like where we are, or whether you're reporting to a leadership team or for a board. But again, that will then help you for next year to also see seasonality. So, okay, every January, we know that we get less leads, or every July, we know that there's an influx of interest. So we need to plan for that. That's all really, really important. So establishing the frequency of your data sets, data reports, and how you're doing it, again, very important. And for the ones that are talking about daily, reviewing, you may want to look into live dashboards. Again, whole other topic, could discuss, but a little bit of an obsession for me of seeing a live dashboard. You can actually see what's happening live, which then helps identify anything that you might be doing with campaigns, especially with launching new stuff. That's quite important. And then the final thing is number 3. So number 3 really is learn and optimize. Sorry, it is very, very hot today. Learn and optimize. So when you see the data, it's knowing and understanding the analysis behind the data. So not just seeing it and being like, oh, cool, this was nice. We had a lot of traffic this month to our website, or we had an increase in leads. Yeah, so what? What did I do with it? What happened next? So really analyzing what happened at each level. What was the conversion at each funnel? What was the frequency that you were posting on social? What was the hours that people were ringing? Were their calls being answered? What was the response rate to messages? All of that. And then I like to use the agile way of thinking of what went well, what didn't go well, and what would you do next? So the do next can be, we wouldn't do that, or, oh, we'd like to try this, but kind of having that review. And especially if you're doing like a monthly report to make quite big decisions of changes, or even the 2-week sprint, the bi-weekly, you can then, by having that earmarked out of what went well, what didn't go well, and what you want to try, use that to reflect back if you ever need to see what happened there, or how do we change this? So it's really then understanding how you make those changes, which is why I'm saying the frequency is so important. Because if we're saying learn and optimize, you don't want to be optimizing too quickly, too soon, and too frequently, because then, to be honest, you're not going to get any learnings because you're changing too much too frequently. So hopefully in a nutshell, that has given you the best overview about data. And like I said, there is so much more to go into data, but data is your friend and data is the science behind the beauty art. So thank you for joining me for another episode of Engage and Thrive, and hope to see you next week with Eat with Taelon, your host.